Yeah, my name is Lakshmi, and I live
And
and
I
serve
live and serve
here in the Ananda
here
Palo
in the
Alto community, which is where I am now. Um, and let's see, I've been serving here. I came to the Ananda Palo Alto community in 2012 and very quickly just started to integrate into the culture and into a path of seva. And then about 6 years ago or so, I started working more specifically with the Sangha staff, and I officially came on to the Sangha staff in 2020. And so I've been serving as one of the co-managers here at our Sangha temple for the last 4 years and serving as one of our teachers and light bearers and ministers. And so it's just been a wonderful joy to get to deepen my own spiritual path. I do still serve part-time as a high school English teacher. So my school year starts tomorrow, actually. So I'm just gearing back up for that. And I'm there in the mornings, working with students who are in the 11th grade. So I teach 11th grade English. And then from about 12:30 on, or 11:30 on, I'm at the Sangha for the rest of the day. So it's a beautiful balance and a beautiful mix. And I get to bring the light of these teachings into both aspects of my life, in both direct and indirect ways. So very grateful to be here with all of you. Um, and let's see, as I was thinking about this reading today, it was interesting. Swami Shanti, who many of you probably know, she's giving service here in Palo Alto today. And yesterday we hosted a big hike about 2 or 3 times a year. On our calendar, we put a hike on the calendar and we all go off. We call it a spirit in nature hike. And we go off to one of the many beautiful sites that we're blessed to have here in the Bay Area, for a little afternoon hike and just to be out in the sunshine and in nature and to enjoy company with one another. And we were driving together to the trailhead and talking about this reading because we're both giving the reading. She's giving the talk here in Palo Alto, and she knew that I was going to be online with all of you today. And we were talking about how tricky this reading actually can be, because really it's a call to action in a lot of ways. It's a challenge that I feel Master is giving us, by this example of, we can see God in all of those exoteric ways. We can feel God in all of those impersonal interpretations. But then we get this challenge to go even deeper. Can you take that one step further? And I was thinking about just what a triumph it is for us when we can remember to think of God in our daily lives and when we can remember to see God in the beauty of nature. As I was sharing, we were hiking yesterday, and I just had the great privilege. I spent the last few days in Yosemite National Park. It's sort of become an end of the summer tradition for me to go and spend a few days up in the park and hiking. And, I was with Shanti and with one of our other friends, and we were going to all of these incredible sites, and we were just sitting by these beautiful rivers, and of course, singing Swami Kriyananda's song, "The lilt of the water will gather your worries, carry them down to the sea." And so we were just singing and laughing and enjoying nature so much. And I remember that experience one day. She and I had woken up very early and we walked over to the river and we're sitting there and just meditating. We'd energized and sat down to meditate. And I could feel God's presence so acutely and so beautifully. And I could feel God flowing through the rivers. I could feel God in the peaks of the mountains and the beautiful sunsets and the clouds and everything that we were enjoying. And it's such a triumph for us when we get to remember that, when we get to feel God and bring God into those aspects. And then I came home and read this reading, and I realized that the challenge that we're being given here is to push that one step further. It's not to say, I feel God in the rivers, or I see God in the mountaintops, or what we get in this reading. I love that line, I wrote it down just so I could get it, to feel his wrath in the thunder, the restless energy in the brooks, that he reveals himself in the beauty of the sunsets. And what Yogananda and Swamiji are challenging us to remember here is that to feel God in those acute ways, that that's still just the superficial experience of God, that there's something even deeper for us to dig into. And that's both exciting and overwhelming, at least for me. I remember one of the first times that I was reading a book on the life of Rajarsi Janakananda, and there was a line, I'm not going to remember it perfectly, but the feeling sat with me so well. And I remember that Master Yogananda was talking about how deeply Rajarsi was meditating and how deep and how he would go into these exalted states of samadhi. And then he was talking to one of the other disciples, and he was saying of these experiences of samadhi that Rajarsi was going into, entering into in his meditation. He was saying that that was only the beginning. And I remember what a thrill that was for me, but also a feeling of overwhelm to imagine that going into an exalted state of samadhi is just the beginning, that that's just skimming the surface of what the experience of God, of true communion with the divine actually is. Because it was such a poignant memory, it was such a poignant experience for me because I thought, we don't even know what we don't know. We can just skim the surface so beautifully and pull out the divine joy of God in everything that we feel, but that's just the superficial, that's just the first layer of what it means to experience the divine. And of course, that's what the masters have come to show us. And that's what the examples from Autobiography of a Yogi reveal to us, which is that this is the first step to start to feel God in the brooks, to see God in the glory of the sunsets, to feel God's wrath and power in the thunder. That when we can begin to take these first steps, what we're doing ultimately is just starting to refine our consciousness just a little bit at a time. And that perspective shift that comes with the refinement of our consciousness is just like this beautiful. I actually pulled up the affirmation that we were reading today because it was just, I lost it on my phone, but it was just so beautiful. It's the perfect affirmation to expand our sense of self, to expand ourselves when we can begin to feel ourselves in the beauty of all that surrounds us. Then what happens is that limited perspective that we have, that our ego globs onto, this is who I am, this is what makes me happy, this is what I need. Or even that question, this is how I experience God. This is how I see the divine. That when we can begin to shatter even that shell of a point of view or a perspective, that what happens is our consciousness begins to expand into the infinite. We take what is finite and we expand it into that limitless consciousness, which is, of course, the example that the gurus gave us. And I love this reading because, as I said to you, I started out the other day and I was saying to Shanti, I don't like this reading. This reading is tricky. This one is complicated because I think that challenge to be pushed, it's a little bit daunting for us. It's telling us, don't ever stop. Don't ever stop putting out energy. That even in those moments when you feel so close to the divine, when you have a meditation where your heart is just opened or you're absorbing the beauty of the natural environment around you and you're feeling connected to the divine, don't stop there. Keep pushing, push further. And then what happens is that veil of delusion begins to break. That veil of delusion begins to shatter down. And suddenly we see the reality beyond what is right in front of us. Just yesterday, the second Saturday of every month, we offer a family service here, which is very fun. So we have kids from all ages, 3 years old up to about 10 or 11 years old. They start to age out after that. When they become teenagers, they tell their parents that they want to go and do other things and spend time with their friends and all of that. But we have this great range of ages, as I said, from about 3 to 10 or 11 years old. And we, in our family service, we do some chanting together. We do a little bit of yoga, very little meditation. And then we always have a story or an activity or a game that we play. then we end with a fire ceremony and an arati, which is very fun. And so yesterday, my friend Shantala and I, who co-host the family service, Shantala came up with the idea. She said, because of the reading today, does God hide the truth? Let's be truth seekers. Let's do experiments. Let's, as you know, Master said, the laboratory is inside of us. Let's explore with them. And so she, who is a little bit, as I said, an English teacher, so my mindset is always sort of into the humanities, and she's a math and science. She's inclined toward math and science. So she looked online and found all these great little activities to do with the students. And she drew them up on the board. She drew this one activity on the board. She drew two solid lines, and the solid lines were the exact same measurement in width. But on one, she put arrows facing in, and on the other, she put arrows facing out at the end of the line. And of course, the line with the arrows facing out looked much longer. And so she was having all of the little kids come up and say, which line is longer? And all of us, even me, she did it to me, which one's longer? I said, well, that one with the arrows pointing out. And then we got a measuring tape and everybody got to go up and measure it. And you could see that they were the exact same width. And then we did another experiment where she drew on the board an arrow that was facing this way and a little smiley face with eyes that were looking off to the right. And then she put a cylinder of water in front of it. And we got to look through the cylinder of water. And because of the way the water reflects the light, everything changed directions. So whereas on the whiteboard, the arrow was pointing this way, when you looked through the water, the arrow was pointing that way. It was actually quite fun. Not only did the kids enjoy it, we loved it. All the parents were looking and we were having so much fun. And of course, the purpose of doing these experiments was to get into that experience that things are not always what they seem. That what we see on that superficial level, what we absorb through the senses, isn't always what is true. That there's a deeper truth that we can explore. And it was just such a perfect experiment. It was, in my mind, just an inspired idea that she had, because it's exactly what Yogananda asks of us, to be scientists, to experiment, and to go into our meditations and to explore, is that line exactly the same, or does this line look longer? And of course, what does that mean in our meditations? How deeply am I experiencing God? Do I feel a sense of calmness in my heart? Do I feel still in my heart? And then maybe we really love that feeling of stillness, but is there something deeper that I can explore? Can I expand that stillness? Can I feel that sense of self or that sense of peace for myself? Can I become that sense of peace? And this is the promise that the great masters have given us, that they say, if we just keep excavating, if we just keep digging further, as we refine our consciousness, that of course the opportunities are limitless, that infinite consciousness, that veil will drop and infinity is what is waiting for us. And, the masters come and Yogananda comes and he gives us just brief glimpses of this. And, there was a beautiful story. I was listening to a talk that Nayaswami Anandi gave on this exact reading from 2026 or 2016, sorry. And she was telling a beautiful story. She said, and I think that this is actually true. This is much like a lot of us have heard the story of how to catch a monkey. It's an Indian story of how to catch a monkey. And what you do is you put a banana inside of a cage and the monkey will grab the banana, but it won't let go. So it's stuck. It knows that if it just dropped the banana, it could walk away, but it won't let go. And so we've all heard that story, and I found out that that is actually true. So I think this story must be true as well. But she was saying that in India, the way that they train a parrot to speak is that they put a mirror in front of the parrot in its cage, and then the teacher will stand behind it. So the parrot is looking at the mirror and it's looking at itself in the mirror and it's hearing somebody behind it speaking. And so the parrot thinks that it's actually being taught by another parrot. So again, I don't know if that's true or not, but it's a perfect metaphor for the way that we interact with the world, because that's what the masters do. And this is what Nayaswami Anandi was saying, that the masters come down and they become the parrot in the mirror. They look like they're human beings. They walk around the world as though they're living in this world and interacting with a consciousness that's similar to ours. But of course, what we know is that the masters come and their consciousness is actually infinite, that it's something that we can't even begin to comprehend. One of my favorite stories from um, Conversations with Yogananda is the story where he'd spent the whole day recording one of his chants, What Lightning Flash. And he says that the story goes that they were recording it over and over again. And so they'd spent hours recording this. Then they came home and Master brought it, and all of the monks gathered around and they were listening to it. And he was out on the lawn, on Mount Washington, out on the lawn listening to it. What lightning flash glimmers in thy face? And as he's listening, his hands are out and his eyes are closed, and he's just listening and he's saying, play it again, play it again, play it again. And they're playing it over and over again. And at the end, he turns to all of the monks and he says, I see you all as sparks of light. And it reminds me of that story of Rajasi where he goes into samadhi, but Master says he's only beginning to experience. It's that same feeling for us. We can sit and bask in the beauty of God's play, but what does it mean to actually know that it's all that beam of light, that everything is just a show of light and shadow, that none of it is actually real? And that's what Krishna is saying to us in this reading when he says, let me pull the line exactly. In me are all existences contained, not I in them. You see, we absorb the world through that limited perspective, and we think God is in this, God is in that, God is here, God is there. But the perspective shift for us is begin to say, ah, no, everything is the manifested divine play. Just like Yogananda can say to us, I see you all as light. And so the masters come down and they parrot themselves for us. I love Autobiography of a Yogi. Every time I read it, I have that experience that this is the only book we ever have to read again. And if we could truly know it, we could truly understand it, we would be free, which is, of course, probably the truth. But what I love in this story, or what I love in this book, is that we get all of these examples of the masters playing the role of the human being. And they have feelings and thoughts and reactions, and they're just so human for us because they're giving us those examples of what it truly means to strive for God. I just had the great privilege. I just got home about 3 weeks ago. I'd spent 2 weeks in India with one of my friends, Kushama, who runs the high school here. So we went to Puri, where Sri Yukteswar's Mahasamadhi Mandir is. And then we went to Kolkata to visit Master's boyhood home and the Tulsi Bo Shrine and a few other places. And then we went to Varanasi, and we were in Varanasi over Guru Purnima, which is the only day in the year that they actually open Lahiri Mahashaya's home, and you can go into his home and have darshan there. And so we had this beautiful 2 week trip where we were just immersed in the places where our gurus lived and served and meditated. Um, and I remember the experience of walking into the Mahasamadhi Mandir in Puri. Puri is this beautiful little beach town. So you're right on the Bay of Bengal. And India, for those of you that have been, you'll know it well. India is just this beautiful combination of chaos and peace all the time. And so, everywhere you go, it's just a little chaotic and it's always a whirlwind and a trip. And so we decided that we would walk to the ashram where the Mahasamadhi Mandir is. And so we were a little overwhelmed by the time we got there because walking even a mile, as I said to my friends, walking a mile in India is not like walking a mile in the US. It's just you're navigating dogs and cats and cows and all kinds of motorbikes and different things like that. And so we got there and we were searching around and finally found the ashram. We rang the bell to go into the ashram and somebody opened the door. And it happened to be in the city of Puri. There's also a very big temple, which is called the Jagannath Temple. And there was a huge festival happening that day. So the city itself was very quiet because everybody was at the festival. once a year they take the Mortis out of the festival and they go on a 2 week parade. And so this was the final day. We happened to be in Pori the day that the Mortis were returning. So it was a very big day, and everyone was at the temple. So everything else was very quiet, and there was only one man at the ashram, and he let us in, and we went and we walked and we sat at Sri Yukteswar's Mahasamadhi Mandir. And I wasn't sure what I was going to experience or what to expect there. But as I sat down, you can sit just outside of the mandir. There's a little door that they open up for you for just a few minutes where you can go into the space where his body actually is, just under the ground. But then otherwise, you can sit outside around it, and you can stay as long as you want. So we sat for a few hours and meditated. And the more that I was tuning into Sri Yukteswar and tuning into the experience, I found myself just slowly trying to get more and more aligned with his consciousness there. And the experience that I had was, this sounds morbid at first, though I'll explain it a little bit more. I was saying it to a friend the other day. The feeling that I had sitting at Sri Yukteswar's Mahasamadhi Mandir was the experience that I didn't want to exist. And not in a morbid way, but actually in a release of the ego, just like we hear in that beautiful affirmation for self-expansion, that we release the ego and we're soaring in freedom. And I just kept having that experience. It was like a tangible experience of how heavy the ego actually is, of the weight of what it means to carry this ego around with us all the time. And here in this place where Sri Yukteswar left his body was just that gentle coaxing to start to let go, to drop the veil, to allow yourself to fall more deeply into the consciousness of the divine. And it's not like I had an actual experience of what it would be like to not have the ego, but it was just the slightest taste of what it means to actually be able to let that go, to walk truly in the consciousness of the divine, just like that story that we hear of Master, where someone asks him, what is it like to carry around a body and to come back? And he says, it's like putting on a heavy overcoat on a hot summer day. And so, again, that experience of what it's like just to release the ego, to really know that I don't exist because everything is only a play of God. Which is why, of course, that metaphor that Master gives us of the beam of light in the movie theater is the perfect metaphor. It's inspired because everything that's happening on that play, on that stage in front of us, comes from one place. Just like he can say it's all light and shadows. The same is true for us. We can have that experience when we're sitting in a movie theater and we're watching that. And what this talk or what this reading actually challenges us and asks us to do is to constantly keep pushing toward that goal, to never settle, to never let it be enough, no matter how deep, no matter how profound the experiences are. It can feel disheartening when you say, we can't know God. The faculty, the intellectual faculties can't know God, or no matter how much we're experiencing the divine, it's still just superficial. At first, you can say, well, that's disheartening, but it's actually encouraging because there's so much more that's unveiled to us. And that's what the masters coax us toward. That's what they bring us deeper and deeper into that experience of having until we can sit with a Sri Yukteswar at his Mahasamadhi Mandir and say, goodness, I actually feel the desire to be nothing. I actually feel the desire to drop the ego. And we can begin to have just these little tastes here and there of what that truly means, of what that experience truly can be. And so the question we're being challenged here to explore and to look at is, where are we looking? What are we looking for? And to know that both of those realities exist within us. I wanted to share one final story and then I'll wrap up here so I don't talk too long. But there's a beautiful story from the Upanishads. We get a lot of stories about birds today. We had our parrot story, and now there's this beautiful story, and it's the parable of the two birds. And there are two birds that are sitting on a branch. And the way that the story goes, of course, there's many different versions, but my favorite is that the two birds are deep soul friends. And one of the birds is all around him, grabbing at all of the fruit and tasting all the sweet and bitter fruit and enjoying everything that's surrounding him on the branch. And the other bird is very still. And the other bird is simply watching. And of course, what this parable represents is that we are both aspects of that bird. That part of us, our ego consciousness, is grabbing at everything that's around us, good and bad, that we're constantly drawing in through our senses the experiences of the world, which is that superficial experience. But that just behind that veil, just a little bit more deeply within, rests that second bird who's sitting and watching, who's watching the experience of grabbing and tasting and touching and taking in for ourselves. And he's sitting calmly. And that bird is what we're ultimately tapping into through our meditations, through the chanting that we're doing, through the affirmations that we're doing. We have so many tools to help us to begin to refine our consciousness, to drop that veil, and that we can become more and more like that second bird. And I remember this is a story that my friend Sai Ganesh told me many years ago, and I loved it. I'd never heard it before that. And ever since then, whenever I find myself in a moment that feels really peaceful, or I'm looking out at, again, just like this reading mentioned, those beautiful sunsets or the mountain peaks or the babbling brooks, I always come back to this story and I remember it. And I try just in a moment, even in the enjoyment of the beauty and the nature, even in the closeness or the experience of the divine, to be that second bird, to just detach myself even a little bit more from the experience, to try and give it all away to God. Because this is, of course, ultimately what we're trying to do. We're trying to just release every experience, good and bad, into that current of divine energy until we wake up one day and we realize, just like that beautiful touch of an experience that Sri Yukteswar gave me at his Mahasamadhi Mandir, we don't exist. We are no longer here. There is no consciousness, no ego, no desire left. It's simply us and the divine. And that reminded me, I wish that I had a guitar so I could sing the song for you, but it reminded me this morning of that beautiful song from Swami, Well Done, Lord, that starts out and says, in India there lived on the banks of a stream a hermit whose prayer chose applause for his theme. Then it goes on, he gazed at the flowers and he smiled at the sun and then he clapped with delight and he cried, Well done. And then he goes on to praise the mountains and the streams and the joy of all experiences and the power of youth and of victories and all of the myriad of human experiences that we have. But then the very last line, which I wrote down again so I wouldn't mess it up. At last I've discovered the mystic key. The world's joys, O secretive one, replies to your sweetness in me. For here in my heart lies the answer, your love shedding light like the sun. All life seems to leap like a dancer. When gazing, I see only thee. At the end of the day, it all gets turned back inward. It all just becomes an experience of recognizing that the divine creation is dancing through everything. And when we can begin to see that mystic key, that the world's joys replies to your sweetness in me, that it all comes from the divine, just as Krishna tells us here when he says, in me are all existences contained. In me are all existences contained, not I in them. Whatever we experience in outward joys and pains and pleasures, that it all comes from the divine. And it's all there simply to help us to remember, to drop the veil, to listen more closely, to look more closely, and to be just like my friend Sai Ganesh inspired me with this beautiful parable of the two birds, to be the second bird, to just pause in the midst of all experiences and feel that sense of detachment instead of grabbing at everything that's around us to try and find that joy, to sit quietly, to sit stilly, and to listen for that divine call from within. Thank you all.
Thank you so much, Lakshmi. Wow, living everyday life with all that you said. It made me think about chopping carrots,
Mm.
because that's my thing. When I chop a carrot, if I'm not in the awareness of God, can't tell you why, except for many years ago, something happened and I chopped carrots and thought of God, and it was so sweet. So there you go. Now it's expanded to celery and,
Yeah.
and the mountaintops as well, which I got to see in California, but we don't have mountains here. So anyway, anyone in the room, we have a mic set up for questions. You can come, questions or comments for Lakshmi. And who's that online? Is that Dinah?
Dinah.
Hi, Dinah. You can put something in the chat as well, Dinah.
So, I just, you probably noticed, Lakshmi, that we're having some technical difficulties this morning. And I just wanted to let everybody know here in the room, and also anybody who might join through our Facebook stream or our YouTube stream, that Lakshmi's talk, that the problem is completely local. So her talk, the recording of it is going to be nice and pristine. So if you want to hear her talk uninterrupted by all the digital noise, then you can go to our website probably tomorrow and see it in its entirety without all that stuff. So, and I just want to say thank you for the story about the parrot. That was a wonderful one, and I'm sure I'll be using that in a class.
Yeah.
Or many classes.
Yeah. Yeah, I'd heard it just for the first time yesterday and I loved it immediately. I thought that's perfect. So, yeah.
It is. So thank you very much.
Well, and I'm going to be drawing the line on the board with the arrows facing the way. That one I knew, but I didn't know the one about draw the line with a smiley face and an arrow, I think it is, but then look through glass and it changes. That one I haven't done.
I know.
So,
yeah.
and
Yeah,
our
it was so
scientists
fun.
in the room.
Yeah. Yeah, they loved it. You know, all the little kids were looking at it, but then we were about to move on and the parents all said, "No, no, no, I want to see. I want to see." So it
Right.
was fun for everyone.
Exactly. Okay, everybody's being quiet on this warm morning here. Questions, comments? Okay, no one's moving. Well, I'm going to just say that the affirmation for today on self-expansion really touched me for some reason. As I said earlier today, we've probably read this since we've been on this path 30-something years, 50 times. Yes, and you know how it is. Something goes, whoa, and you get I don't know if I can even put it in words, but something zings you and you know more deeply something. And so I'm going to be sitting with this expansion about outwardness. As Swami says, if you take a lump of pizza dough, now we've all done this, we've made homemade pizzas, and you stretch it, yes, it gets broader, but thinner. And then you have problems when it gets thinner. And as he says, such is the case when we stretch the mind only outward, that it might feel like we're getting more and more and more, but it's also getting thinner. And we just really have to be careful with that. So this really struck me. So I'm going to be using this affirmation more than just this past week and today.
Yeah.
I guess I'll have a question. Does God hide the truth? Just from the title, how do we intuit the truth? How do we know between all the choices A and B that we can come up with during the day, every day? How do we know whether A or B is the right path? How do we know what our highest truth is continually?
Yeah,
Because it keeps coming up. How many times a day do we actually have these A's or B's? a lot, I do believe. They may seem insignificant, turn left or right, or do I help a person or do I not help a person? I mean, it can be in so many throughout the days. So how about opening that for discussion? Or Lakshmi, and then anybody in the room want to comment on that too?
Yeah. Yeah, absolutely. I think it's a good question for discussion because there's no answer that's truly satisfying. This question comes up a lot, and it's a question of Shanti, who is one of my kind of direct mentors here. She always says it's hard to know God's will because when you're in a room with 10 people, there's 10 God's wills. It's just we're all tuning in and thinking and trying to feel for ourselves what is right. And the best advice that I've ever been given, really, and it ties back to this parable of the two birds from the Upanishads, is to take a step in one direction and then to stop and to feel and to listen. And the question that we have to ask ourselves is, how attached am I to the outcome? So whether to take, maybe you have, a fork in the road and you could go left or you could go right, both of them are going to lead back home. At the end of the day, okay, maybe one took a little bit longer, or maybe you went right and you got caught in traffic and you were frustrated, then you should have turned left. Sometimes it can be mundane things, but when it's larger questions, we have to ask ourselves, how attached am I to the results? How attached am I to the outcome? Because our emotional attachment clouds our intuition. Intuition is cleanest when we're detached from the results of it. And so I think that is one of the ways that I've found that to be true, even in something that I've been struggling with in my own life. And just here I am and being given an opportunity to really serve and to take on more responsibility. And there's a little part of me that is intimidated by that. And so I keep saying, well, maybe I just can't do it. Maybe I'm not good. And maybe God's telling me that I shouldn't do this. And I just can be so clear in my mind and hear that that's the ego, that's the fear, that's apprehension. And so I can just stop and try and listen and try and take one step forward and explore it and experiment. And if it feels like it's too much, God's going to tell us one way or another. We're going to find out that we're headed in the wrong direction if we're actually sincerely listening, and we're not just kind of bulldozing our way through. But I would be very interested to hear what others think or experiences others have with that.
Thank you, Lakshmi.
So the microphone's here if you have a comment. Mallory? Mallory.
Okay.
Otherwise she can't hear you.
This is Mallory.
Hello.
Thank you so much for your talk and your passion. I feel your passion for all of this. It's very inspiring. So my thought about sometimes making choices is, Christ said, I think it's Christ that said it, where two or more are gathered, I am there also. And so sometimes I might ask people that I trust, for feedback. It wouldn't be the final decision they would give me, but people that know me, have known me for a long time, are on the spiritual path. I might ask them to gather with me and pray or just talk to them. So that's what I'm thinking.
Wonderful. Yeah, it's really true. There's so many reasons that Yogananda inspired us to live and serve and work in community. And of course, that's one of them. We have mirrors all around us for helping us to redirect and reorient.
Namaste, this is T2. How are you?
Hello. Very well.
Can you hear me?
Yes.
He's there.
There you go. Okay, I'm sorry.
He's right there.
Can you hear me?
Yeah, yeah, it was just,
Your energy is contagious, and we are dumbfounded here. So, having said that, two things came to my mind. One is Yogananda ji, and I think Swami Yukteswara ji taught us attunement. And in the Bhagavad Gita, the main discourse is Nishkam Karma. And I think you covered both of those. To my question as to how do we know, how do we discern? And I think Swami Kriyananda took it a step forward also. Sometimes, let's say we made a left turn, but that doesn't mean we keep turning left or keep going straight either. And to this, you said keep an open mind. And as long as we are tuned, we might get instantaneously further directions. So that doesn't mean continue on the same path either. So I guess, again, two things. The ego is very subtle, and it can pretend to be tuned. So with that thing that you don't exist, then if we go on the infinite space and attune ourselves, then mostly that direction comes. And there is no me and I, and there is no him either, because there is no boundary. That is the true existence. How, and I'm getting off the subject. When Yoganandaji describes how he traveled the cosmos and the celestial music and visiting so many planets, basically that's piercing the atom. And all this energy is released and you're in a very different space. Because the atom is 99.9999% space. So I guess there must be a reason for it. Why? I don't know. I have a little clue, but getting back to the subject, attunement, openness of mind, and nishkam karma, like we are not focused on the result we want. But then again, if we are tuned to the divine and it is a divine motivation, then we also must plant our will through superconscious, subconscious, and conscious. And I think Yoganandaji taught us that also. So God is very simple. He's as simple as the breath we are taking, yet He is ineffable and beyond thought. Hari.
Beautiful. Yes. As you were sharing, I was thinking about, that question or this topic of attunement. I was thinking about a friend of mine. I'll share her story. She, this was a few years ago. We were in, I think some of you have done the Living Discipleship program. And we were in the midst of our Living Discipleship program, and we were being guided through a visualization of what's next for us. And she was just being asked to take on a pretty big role here in Palo Alto. And she was visualizing allowing Master to be there with her, to have Yogananda with her. And so she said she was in this visualization and just sort of contemplating it. And she kind of saw herself driving a car, and she opened the passenger door to let Master come in and said, "Come on, drive with me," which is how so many of us would think. Yes, we want you right next to us. But if you remember the Bhagavad Gita, Krishna's actually the one driving the chariot, not Arjuna. So she said in this visualization, she just had this experience of Master going, and he walked around to the driver's passenger side of the door, opened the car door, she got out, sat in the passenger seat, and he was driving the car. And I think that even that subtle shift in attunement, so often we're saying, I'm doing this and I'm asking Master to guide me. I'm doing this and I'm asking Divine Mother to be with me. But even the subtle shift to that, Divine Mother is doing this, and I'm just here. I'm here to be a willing channel. But the challenge for us, and this is what I've always been so grateful for, I explored a few different spiritual paths before I found Ananda. And one of the main differences I always found in Ananda in the path of self-realization was that we are never allowed to sit passively on this path. This is a path of dynamic energy. From the type of meditation we do, Kriya Yoga asks us to use and to move a lot of energy. It's not like a passive form where we're sitting back and watching. We're actually doing, and we're moving energy, and we're serving, and we're constantly putting out more. And when we think we can't do any more, Master asks us to just push a little bit harder. And so even though Krishna's driving the chariot or Master's driving the car, in the case of my friend and her sort of visualization that she was going through, we don't sit passively. We're right there with the map in our hand, helping to guide and drive, and we're putting all of our effort and energy in. And I think it's through that duality of saying, I'm not the doer, but I'm giving it all of my energy, that our attunement starts to refine, our intuition refines, and we really begin to feel what it is that God's asking us to do, and we can start to surrender the ego more and more. So thank you for sharing that. Beautiful stories and examples.
Okay, we can sit in silence for about 7 minutes, or that's okay. Any thoughts? Oh, here's Carolyn.
Thank you for being with us today. I was away last week for about a week. I have a friend whom I've known since the 8th grade. Since we were 8 years old. She was in major distress and asked me if I would come there. And so I got ready to do that and did go there, and she certainly was in major distress. And it was really very hard to be there. And I just kept praying about that. And I had talked to Supriya. We put her on our prayer list. I put her on another one when I got home, of a person I know, not in this faith, but who's very faithful. And one day, we were trying to get credit cards back. She had no car. She'd lost her fob. It was a mess. And, to help her, she was defensive when I would try to help. And she settled down after a while because I got the message from above. It was just time for me to be quiet. And I did that. And she really didn't want me to leave on the day I was supposed to go. So I stayed one more night and then came back. And since then, her texts have been that she's so much better. And I just didn't take any of that credit because I was just being asked to go because I've known her forever. We're almost like sisters. Not exactly, but, I just knew it was that I was being led to do that. And I said I could help in the littlest way. She still needs a lot of help, but she's so much better. And sometimes that's what I try to do when I see someone. I just felt when it's put in front of me, I try to help. Is that what you're talking about? You're saying it's that God's kind of, we only get a little bit of that, and I've certainly had a little bit. So I really, really believe. And I just try to lead with what I'm told.
Yeah, I think it's beautiful, and the way that you can be there so often. we want to come in and say, I know the answer, let me tell you, or even if we're walking on this path to say, oh, I can tell you, this is all karma, you're going to be fine at the end of it, whatever it may be. But yeah, we've gotten ourselves into trouble with things like that before, at least I could say I have. But the answer,
Yeah.
the subtlety of what you're speaking to, consciousness and energy, that is what's healing. When we're offering Yogananda's healing prayers, we're offering divine energy. We're offering ourselves as a channel so that that divine energy can come through and transform. And that's exactly what you're speaking to, that we can be there and in any ways on the physical plane that we can help getting credit cards back, things like that. We're there to be a support, but more your energy, your consciousness, your willingness to be a present force, to allow yourself to be a channel of God's light. That's what's transforming. That's what's healing. So absolutely, it's beautiful what you're sharing. It's very deep. And sometimes that's true. I used to be the conflict mediator at the high school that I work at now. Before I went part-time, half of my day was spent working with students who were fighting. So I saw students who were at their worst. And often they'd come in and, so many people would try and force them to talk, to share, to break down what was happening for them. And sometimes they would just say to me, I'm not talking. I don't have anything to say. And I would say, no problem. And we would just sit there in silence, and not intimidating silence, but I might just be working at my desk or something, and they'd just be right next to me, and 10, 20, 30, 40 minutes would go by sometimes. And then finally they'd feel they were in a space where they could share, and that's not me. I'm not doing anything. I'm just creating a space where they can feel held and seen and supported, which is exactly what you're doing. Yeah, it's beautiful what you're sharing.
Well, I did help her. She still has a long way to go, but I was just so pleased that she was a little bit happier
Yeah, yeah,
when I left. So
yeah, that's beautiful.
I just knew it was God helping me.
Yeah.
I just knew it. And about the being silent, that really helped, to not be, that kind of stuff. Thank
Yeah.
you very much.
Beautiful.
Very sweet.
Yeah, I was thinking that that's like a satsang. That's like a very super conscious satsang that you had the receiving with a lot of grace to flow through her. And they'd say satsang is very important for all of us all the time. And that's what came to mind.
Well, thank you. Thank you, Mike.
You're welcome.
I just hope that she keeps receiving that.
Yeah. And she is on our healing prayer list, and
Yes.
we
And
just,
then I put her on a second one.
good,
And she was so grateful for that,
good,
what she wrote in her
yeah.
last text.
Okay, we're going to wrap up.
Well, it's been, I'm so appreciative. The topic, like you said, is deep. And, esoteric and exoteric, and then oh my gosh, is that what it means? And I think we went pretty deeply into it. So I'm thrilled about it. Thank you very much.
Wow. Yeah, thank you guys so much. It
Yeah.
was such a joy. The only thing that would be better is sitting in that room with all of you, but this, I feel like I'm there, so I'm very grateful.
No, we welcome that. If you ever find yourself flying in this direction, what we're doing sometimes is having people stop off and then keep going to wherever they were going, such as Darshan. When he came from California, going back to Italy, we convinced him somehow, bribed him, whatever, for 5 days to come here, and what an incredible time. And then, okay, now you can go back to Italy. So whatever way we can do it by Master's grace, we do.
Yeah, a personal pickup at DFW Airport is always available.
Absolutely. We will get you from the airport. We'll give you a bed.
Wonderful. I would love that.
Yeah.
Okay.
Love that.
Well, thank you, Lakshmi, for joining us online, and Just have a wonderful, are you off to Sunday service now?
Yeah, our Sunday service starts, so
There.
I'm here in the temple offices, so I'll sneak over there in a couple of minutes just to make sure they have everything they need. But yeah, so I get double services today, double joy.
Okay, well, have a beautiful rest of your day.
Yeah.
Thank you all
Thank
so
you.
much. Thank you
We
for
really
sharing your
appreciate it.
story.
And in honor of Maitri, you all know how to end this? Who's going to lead it? What do we say? Namaste. Y'all. Oh, can't believe it. Bye-bye, Lakshmi. God
Bye-bye,
bless.
you guys.
God bless you.
God bless.
Bye-bye.